We've all heard the rant about how society is going downhill. First, it was because of all those people who stayed inside reading all day instead of going outside. Then it was people who watched TV all day instead of reading, and so on. These days, the new target of technological concerns is social media. All of this plays into how society views information and technology from a utopian or a dystopian perspective. The concept of utopia is that of a perfect society, with no suffering and universal prosperity. Dystopia, on the other hand, is a society where people experience more harm than good, a place where injustice and suffering run rampant. Responsibility for either of these scenarios is often attributed to technology and information, and the arguments for the benefits and drawbacks of each have been contentiously argued for decades. Perceptions of info and tech from a utopian or a dystopian perspective varies based on public opinion at different times and can often be measured by its representation in entertainment, which historically reflects popular sentiment. Today, we'll be looking at positive and negative views of infotech, the way it's been, the way it is now, and why we're currently in the middle of a strong dystopian trend. On the way, we'll take a look at recent debates on the issue. To truly understand what causes a shift in public opinion, however, we must first look to our past. If there's any period in US history dominated by dreams of a utopian future, it's the 50s. Riding hot off the heels of a popular and successful war, trust in the government was in an all-time high. Advances in nuclear technology and later the space race fueled visions of a futuristic space-age society complete with flying cars, robot butlers, instant portable communication tools, and towering metropolises as far as the eye could see. Of course, much of this New Age optimism was born of anti-Soviet government propaganda, and acted in large part to counteract the fears of encroaching global communism. Though there were exceptions, such as War of the Worlds and earlier works such as 1984, this was the age of Tomorrowland, Space Cadet, and a decade later would be carried on in works like Star Trek. Unfortunately, this public attitude wouldn't last. Increasingly frustrated responses to the war in Vietnam, exacerbated by the recent Pentagon Papers and later the Nixon tapes, as well as growing social unrest, drove a hard wedge between the government and the people, jump-starting a continuing culture of distrust of the government. Previously, the government had been seen as the source of scientific innovation, or at least the source of its funding. But as trust in the government fell, hopes for a utopian future dissipated and were replaced by visions of an America in which the government cared little about its people, allowing for inequality and forcing its citizens to fight in unjust wars. Information was no longer seen as a method of communication, but rather a tool of control, and technology the means to carry it out. Entertainment of the following decades was defined by works like War Games, Blade Runner, Brazil, and more, which depicted futuristic societies with governments and corporations seeking to control and exploit the people using technology. And that brings us to today. It appears as though the popular trend of pessimism has, for the most part, continued, with dystopian visions of the future dominating popular entertainment. In recent years, however, views of technology and information have been shaped by the debate over the internet and social media. No surprise, given that recent studies showed that a whopping 78% of Americans have at least one social media account. Arguments fall on both sides of the aisle. According to supporters of social media, such as information scientists Clay Shirky and Howard Rheingold, it goes like this. Information reduces the cost of participation, allows for new forms of interaction and organization, and fosters collective action.
Media is increasingly less just a source of information and is increasingly more a site of coordination, because groups that see or hear or watch or listen to something can now gather around and talk to each other as well.
Jane McGonigal takes it a step further by vouching for gamification, using game elements to incentivize normally dull behaviors on the internet. Critics, however, claim that the answer isn't so simple. Jaron Lanier, author of You're Not a Gadget, argues that social media allows corporations to turn people into commodities, and that rather than serving the free exchange of information between people, it is used for the exploitation of those people's personal information.
The problem is that even if people are created equal, computers are not. And whoever has the biggest computer, just naturally, even if they don't intend to do anything improper, will use that superior ability to gain this incredible advantage.
One oft-cited example of this is the Facebook Emotional Contagion Study, a controversial experiment run by Facebook to see if it could emotionally manipulate its users by altering the positive and negative content on their news feeds without telling them. Info scientist Sherry Turkle explores another aspect of social media, suggesting that it's causing shorter attention spans among its users and leading them to prioritize mediated relationships over physical interaction.
An 18-year-old boy who uses texting for almost everything says to me wistfully, someday, but certainly not now, I'd like to learn how to have a conversation.
Though the debate rages on among scientists and scholars, the public has gradually been forming its own opinion. Despite the fact that the vast majority of the US participates in social media, a 2014 Pew Research study found that over 81% of respondents felt not very or not at all secure using social media sites when they want to share private information. This is possibly due in part to leaks by ex-NSA employee Edward Snowden, which revealed that the US government was complicit in the mass collection of citizens' private data. Recent entertainment goes even further to satisfy our culture's obsession with dystopian futures, featuring the subversion of infotech. Black Mirror, Feed, Dread, Idiocracy, and the Hunger Games series all come to mind. If the past has taught us anything, public views of the future vary wildly with levels of trust in government and society. With political and social unrest showing signs of return in the past year, and distrust in the government rising once more, it is quite likely that we'll see a new surge in dystopian entertainment to match our own views of the future. However, there is room for doubt. After all, let us not forget that the optimism of the 50s was not necessarily caused by peace and prosperity, but as an answer to that which was perceived to threaten it, and it is entirely possible that future years will see a shift in the same direction. Recent films such as Arrival and Tomorrowland harken back to an earlier dream of a society that works together to achieve technological and communicative growth. As for which future people believe in, we'll just have to see.